Her visa expired at midnight. Her freedom expired with it. Then a stranger in a tailored suit slid a marriage contract across the table and said the deportation stops the second she signs. But so does the life she thought she'd live. He was the lawyer everyone feared and no one crossed, the man who buried enemies in paperwork and silence. So when he walked into her deportation hearing and claimed her as his wife, the entire room went cold, because everyone knew Kim Tae-sung never lied, and he never did anything without a reason. They gave her 1 hour to pack her whole life into a suitcase before they put her on a plane. She never made that flight, because a man with ice in his eyes and blood on his ledger decided she belonged to him instead. Welcome to Afrokorea Seoul Stories. Please like, share, and subscribe. The deportation officer slid the folder across the table like it was nothing. Like it wasn't the end of everything Lucy had built. 3 years in Seoul, gone in one signature. She stared at the paper until the words blurred, until her hands stopped feeling like her own. You have 72 hours, the officer said. Flights already booked. Lucy didn't cry. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry in front of strangers. But her chest was caving in, and the fluorescent lights of the immigration office buzzed like they were laughing at her. The door opened. A man walked in without knocking, without asking permission, like the building belonged to him. Every officer in the room stood a little straighter. The next moment, the air changed. He wore black like a warning. Tall, sharp-jawed, eyes so calm they were terrifying. He didn't look at anyone else. He looked at her. Ms. Adiz Okonkwo? His voice was low, precise, Korean accent smoothing over her name like he'd practiced it. Yes, she said, confused. Who are you? Kim Tae-sung, he said. Your lawyer. As of 5 minutes ago. She blinked. I don't have a lawyer. You do now. The officers exchanged glances. One of them actually paled. A few minutes later, they were alone in a private room, the kind reserved for people with power. Lucy sat across from him, arms crossed, guarded. I didn't ask for help, she said. I know, Tae-sung said, opening the folder like he already knew every word inside it. But you're going to need it. Your case is a mess. Overstayed visa, expired work permit, a company that folded and never filed your paperwork correctly. This isn't your fault, but the system doesn't care about fault. So, what, you're going to fix 72 hours of bureaucracy? No, he said, closing the folder. I'm going to marry you. Lucy laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. I'm sorry. Marriage to a Korean citizen halts deportation proceedings immediately. It buys time, months, maybe years, to fix your status legally. It's the only clean option left. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. I know you've worked 2 jobs to stay afloat. I know you tutor children on weekends for free. I know your landlord tried to evict you illegally last spring, and you fought it yourself and won. I know you don't quit. She stared at him, unsettled by how much he'd clearly read about her in 5 minutes, or maybe longer than 5 minutes. Why do you care? She asked quietly. Something flickered behind his eyes. Something he buried fast. Call it professional interest. She didn't believe that for a second. That evening, Lucy sat in her cramped apartment, staring at the marriage contract he'd left with her. Cold, clinical, full of legal clauses. No mention of love. No mention of anything human. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Decide by morning. The plane doesn't wait. T.S. She threw the phone onto the bed, frustrated. Who did he think he was? But underneath the frustration was something else. Fear. Real fear. If she didn't do something, in 3 days she'd be back where she started with nothing. Her best friend Grace called that night. Marry a Mafia lawyer? Lucy, are you insane? He's not. I don't even know if he's Mafia. People just say that. Everyone says that because it's true. Kim Tae-sung doesn't lose cases. Ever. You know why? Because the people who go against him disappear from the docket. Sometimes they disappear, period. Lucy's stomach twisted. So, you're saying I should say yes to a dangerous man? I'm saying, Grace said carefully, that dangerous men who show up personally for immigration hearings usually want something. Find out what before you sign anything. The next morning, Lucy showed up at his office. A skyscraper in Gangnam, cold glass and steel, the kind of place that made her feel small the moment she walked in. His assistant let her straight through, no waiting. Taesung looked up from his desk like he'd expected her exactly at this hour. You came. I have questions. Ask them. Why me? You could pick anyone. Any woman desperate enough for papers would say yes to a rich Korean lawyer. Why did you come to my hearing? He was quiet for a moment, studying her the way he studied case files, thorough, searching for the thing that mattered. I saw your photo in a file 3 weeks ago. A labor dispute case. You stood up in court, unrepresented, and dismantled the other side's argument piece by piece. I don't forget people who fight like that. Lucy's breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty. That's not a reason to marry someone. No, he agreed. But it's a reason I remembered your name when your deportation file crossed my desk yesterday. The room went quiet. Something passed between them. Something neither of them acknowledged out loud. This is just paperwork, she said, more to herself than him. Nothing real. Nothing has to be real, he said. Except that you'll be safe. That's real enough for me. She signed the contract that afternoon. The wedding was arranged within a week. Small, private, terrifyingly efficient. No love, no vows beyond the legal minimum. Lucy wore a simple ivory dress Grace helped her pick out. Taesung wore black, as always, like color was a weakness he refused to show. Standing beside him at the courthouse, Lucy felt the weight of the moment crash into her all at once. This stranger was now her husband. This cold, unreadable man now had legal claim to her life. When the officiant asked him to say his vows, Taesung looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time without calculation in his eyes. I will protect what is mine, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear it. That is my vow. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't soft. But something in her chest cracked open anyway. The apartment he moved her into was nothing like her old one, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. Silence, so complete it felt like another world. You don't have to pretend anything, he told her the first night, standing in the doorway of the guest room like a man keeping careful distance. This is your space. I won't cross it unless you ask me to. And if I never ask, something unreadable crossed his face. Then I'll respect that too. He left her alone that night, and every night after. But Lucy noticed things, small things. A car waiting outside her new part-time job every evening, though she never asked for one. Fresh groceries stocked exactly to her taste, though she never told him what she liked. A doctor's appointment quietly arranged after she mentioned, once, in passing, that her shoulder had been hurting. He never mentioned any of it. He simply did it the way other men breathed. 3 weeks into the marriage, Lucy attended a work event with him for the first time, a gala full of Seoul's elite, sharp suits and sharper smiles. She felt like an outsider in borrowed skin. A man approached her at the bar, charming, persistent. You must be the wife everyone's talking about. Taesung's full of surprises lately. I suppose I am, Lucy said, uncomfortable under his gaze. The man leaned closer, hand brushing her arm. Lucky him. If you ever get bored of the Ice King. She's not bored. Taesung's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He was suddenly there, close, one hand settling at the small of her back, not rough, but absolute. A claim. The other man paled instantly and excused himself. You didn't have to do that, Lucy murmured once they were alone. I did, Taesung said, jaw tight, eyes dark in a way she hadn't seen before. Watching another man touch you did something to me I didn't expect. What did it do? He looked at her for a long moment, like he was deciding whether honesty was a risk worth taking. It made me want to burn the room down, he said quietly. That's not something I say lightly. Lucy's pulse spiked. This wasn't the cold, clinical man from the contract. This was something else entirely, something dangerous, something real. After that night, things shifted. He started coming home earlier. He started asking about her day, actually listening to the answers. Once, she found him staring at her across the kitchen island, an unreadable intensity in his gaze that made her skin warm. What? She asked. Nothing, he said, looking away first, which surprised her more than anything he could have said. But the tension between them only grew. A brush of hands reaching for the same cup. A held gaze that lasted a second too long. The charged silence of two people carefully avoiding what neither would name. Then came the storm, literally. A typhoon warning shut down Seoul for 2 days. Trapped together in the penthouse, the distance between them collapsed hour by hour. They ended up on the couch by candlelight when the power failed, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Tell me something true," she said quietly, emboldened by the dark. "Not lawyer true. Real true." He was silent for a long moment. "I didn't marry you only for the case," he finally admitted. "I told myself that was the reason."
It wasn't.
"Then what was?" "I watched you fight for a life that kept trying to reject you," he said, voice rough with something he rarely let show. "And I wanted, selfishly, to be part of the reason you finally won." Lucy's breath caught. The rain hammered the windows. Neither of them moved for a long time. Taesung. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't say my name like that unless you mean what I think you mean. Because if you do, I won't be able to stop myself from wanting more than I promised you." The air between them turned thick, dangerous, electric. "Maybe," Lucy whispered. "I don't want you to stop." The candle flickered. His hand came up, hesitant, cupping her jaw like she was something fragile and fierce all at once. "Lucy," he said low and raw. "If I kiss you right now, there's no version of us that goes back to pretending." "Then don't go back," she breathed. The kiss that followed was slow, devastating, years of restraint breaking apart in a single motion. His hand tightened at her waist, pulling her closer, like he'd been starving for exactly this and hadn't let himself admit it. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathless, something had shifted permanently between them. "I should tell you something," he murmured against her forehead, voice tight. "Something about why your case landed on my desk. Something about the enemies watching us right now." Lucy pulled back, unease creeping into the warmth. "What enemies?"
His jaw tightened.
"The kind that don't forgive men like me for having something worth losing." Outside, the storm raged on. But the real danger, Lucy realized, hadn't even started yet. The morning after the storm, Seoul woke up washed clean, but nothing between them felt clean anymore. It felt charged, unfinished, dangerous in the best and worst ways. Lucy lay in bed a moment longer than usual, replaying the kiss in her mind, half convinced she'd dreamed it. But her lips still felt swollen, her chest still felt like it belonged to someone braver than she used to be. She found Taesung in the kitchen, already dressed for war in another black suit, jaw set tight, 2 coffees poured before she'd even walked in. One exactly how she liked it, though she'd never told him. "You remembered," she said, nodding at the cup. "I remember everything about you," he said simply, like it wasn't a confession at all, just fact. "You said enemies," she pressed, no preamble. "Explain." "All of it. I'm done being protected from information that concerns my own life." He studied her for a long moment, weighing whether to soften it. He didn't. "Before I married you, I was already in a war. A quiet one. A German conglomerate called Rheingold Holdings has been trying to buy out half of Seoul's shipping industry through shell companies and falsified manifests. I've spent 2 years building a case to expose them." "What does that have to do with me?" Rheingold's lead negotiator is Victor Adler. Ruthless. Methodical. He doesn't lose, not in boardrooms, not in courtrooms, not in the press. 3 days ago, he found out I married a foreign national with an unstable visa history. Taesung's voice hardened, the words coming out clipped, controlled. "He's already threatening to use it against me, painting our marriage as a sham, a bribery scheme, anything to discredit me before the case goes to court." Lucy's stomach dropped. "So, I'm a liability." "You're a target," he corrected, gently but firmly, setting his cup down and crossing to stand in front of her. "That's different. A liability. I could cut loose without consequence. A target I protect with everything I have. And if you can't protect me?" His hand came up to her jaw, tilting her face toward his. "There is no version of this where I fail to protect you. Understand that now, so you don't have to be afraid of it later. She wanted to believe him. Some reckless, hopeful part of her already did. That afternoon, the threat became real. Lucy had gone to the market alone, small rebellion, a need to feel like herself again outside the glass walls of the penthouse. She was choosing peaches at a stall near the river when she noticed the black sedan idling across the street. Still there when she moved to the next stall. Still there when she doubled back toward the subway, heart climbing into her throat. She called Taesung, voice shaking for the first time since she'd met him. There's a car. It's been following me for 15 minutes. Where are you? Not a question. A command wrapped in calm. She told him. He didn't say anything else. He simply hung up. He arrived in 11 minutes. She counted every one of them. Pressed into the doorway of a flower shop, pulse hammering, pretending to study a bouquet she didn't see. He didn't say a word to her when he stepped out of his car. He walked straight toward the black sedan, opened the driver's door himself without hesitation, and leaned down to say something low and lethal that made the driver's face go bloodless. Whatever it was took less than 10 seconds. The car peeled away seconds later, tires screeching against wet asphalt. What did you say to him? Lucy asked, still trembling, when he finally turned to her. I told him what happens to men who frighten my wife, Taesung said, pulling her against his chest without hesitation, one hand cradling the back of her head like she was something precious he'd almost lost. I meant every word of it. You scared him more than Rheingold does. Good, he said, voice rough. That was the point. For the first time, she didn't pull away from the intensity in him. She melted into it, letting herself be held in the middle of a crowded street, uncaring who saw. He didn't let her out of his sight for the rest of the day. Not out of distrust, out of something closer to devotion turned sharp with fear. He canceled 2 meetings. He had his driver parked directly outside every place she needed to go. When she teased him about it that evening, calling him overbearing, he only tightened his jaw. I watched a car trail my wife through a market today, he said. Overbearing is the least I'm capable of right now. I didn't say I minded, she admitted quietly. Something in his expression cracked open at that, surprise, and beneath it, relief. That night, fear and adrenaline gave way to something neither of them fought anymore. He found her on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the river like it held answers. You didn't sign up for this, he said quietly, standing behind her, close enough that his voice stirred her hair. The danger. The war I've been fighting for years before you ever walked into that immigration office. No, she agreed. But I didn't sign up for you either. And here we are anyway. He turned her gently to face him, eyes dark with something raw and unguarded, stripped of the composure he wore like armor everywhere else. I need you to understand something, Lucy. What I feel for you isn't convenient. It isn't safe. It terrifies me more than Victor Adler ever could, and I have made careers out of not being afraid of anything. Then stop being terrified, she whispered, reaching up to rest her palm against his chest, over the steady, betraying pound of his heart, and just be honest with me. I love you, he said, like the words had been sitting behind his ribs for weeks, waiting for permission he'd never given himself. I didn't plan for it. I fought it, actually, for longer than I'll admit. I don't regret losing that fight. Lucy's eyes filled. I love you too. Somewhere between the wedding and the storm, I stopped pretending this was just paperwork. I think some part of me stopped pretending the moment you walked into that hearing room and said my name like you'd practiced it. I had, he admitted, for 3 days before I ever met you. He kissed her then, not slow this time, but consuming, like a man done holding himself back after years of discipline finally breaking loose in one motion. She met him with equal hunger, hands fisting in his shirt, his arms banding around her like he'd never let the distance return. He carried her inside without breaking the kiss, murmuring her name against her jaw, her throat, like a vow repeated until it became true. The city lights dimmed into shadow beyond the windows, and the door closed behind them on everything that had kept them apart until now. The next morning brought no regret, only a new, unspoken closeness. She woke tangled in him, his hand splayed protectively over her hip even in sleep, and for the first time since arriving in Korea, Lucy felt something close to home. It didn't last. 3 days later, Victor Adler made his move. A scandal dropped across every major financial outlet in Seoul. Prominent lawyers' marriage under investigation for immigration fraud. Anonymous sources. Fabricated timelines. A photograph of Lucy leaving the immigration office the day they met, captioned to imply a transaction rather than a rescue. Reporters swarmed the building by noon. Taesung's firm went into damage control, phones ringing off the hook, junior lawyers scrambling to draft statements no one had time to finalize. Lucy watched it unfold from the penthouse window, sick with guilt, certain the article was true in every way that mattered, that she really had become the weapon Adler needed. That evening, Taesung came home hollowed out from 12 hours of fighting fires and found her quiet in a way that worried him more than tears would have.
They're calling it fraud, she said.
They're saying I trapped you, that you bought yourself a foreign wife to look charitable in the press. None of that is true, and everyone who matters knows it, but it's costing you. I can see it costing you. Everything costs something, he said. I decided a long time ago you were worth the cost. She wanted to believe that, too. But guilt is a patient thing, and it had already started building its case against her, brick by brick, in the dark. She left the next morning, before he woke. A note on the kitchen counter, written and rewritten 4 times before she let herself leave it. I won't be the reason you lose everything you built. I'm sorry. Please don't come looking. Let the story die with me gone. Taesung read it twice before the rage set in, not at her, but at himself, for not saying sooner how far he'd go to keep her, for letting his silence make room for her fear to grow unchecked. He called Grace within the hour. She resisted for exactly 4 minutes before his voice, quiet, controlled, terrifyingly calm, convinced her that resistance would cost Lucy more than honesty would. A guest house on the coast, Grace finally said. Near Sokcho. She said she needed to think. He found her within 6 hours, the drive a blur of highway and barely contained fury, at a small guest house overlooking the water, exactly where Grace had said. He didn't storm in. He knocked, quiet and controlled, though his eyes betrayed the storm underneath the moment she opened the door. You don't get to disappear, he said. Not from this. Not from me. Taesung, they're going to destroy you because of me. I've seen what these stories do. I won't be the reason your name means nothing anymore. Let them try. His voice cracked with something fierce, something she'd never heard from him before. Not composed, not calculated, just raw. I've spent 2 years building a case against Victor Adler that will end his career and half his board. I have the evidence to bury him completely. I was never going to lose this fight, Lucy. But I will lose everything that actually matters to me if you keep running every time things get hard. Lucy's composure broke completely. I'm scared. I've spent my whole life being one signature, one visa stamp, one bad landlord away from losing everything. I don't know how to stop bracing for the moment it all gets taken away. And I can't watch you lose everything because of me too. I won't survive being the reason. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, steady, unmovable, refusing to let even an inch of space return between them. You are not the thing that could destroy me, Lucy. You are the only thing keeping me whole. I have buried enemies for less than what Victor Adler is trying to do to us, and I will bury him too. But I need you home. I need you beside me while I do it.
Come home.
Let me fight for both of us. That's not a request. That's the only thing I'm asking of you in this entire marriage. She held on to him like she'd never let go again, the fight finally leaving her shoulders. Okay, she whispered against his chest.
Okay.
I'm done running. 1 week later, in a courtroom filled with cameras and half of Seoul's financial press, Taesung dismantled Victor Adler's case piece by piece. Evidence of shell companies routed through 3 countries. Bribery records disguised as consulting fees. Falsified shipping manifests that didn't match a single port log in 2 years. He laid it out with the same cold precision that had made him feared in every courtroom in the city, until Adler's own legal team stopped objecting and simply sat in silence, watching their case collapse in real time. By the time the judge called recess, Rheingold holding stock had already dropped 9%. Criminal referrals were filed before the courthouse doors closed for the day. Outside, reporters shouted questions about the marriage scandal, cameras flashing in a wall of light. Taesung didn't dodge them. He pulled Lucy close, in front of every camera in Seoul, her hand laced firmly in his. "My marriage isn't a scandal," he said, voice carrying across the crowd, steady and unshaken. "It's the truest thing I've ever built. I married my wife to protect her from a system that failed her through no fault of her own. I stayed because I love her completely, without condition. Print that instead." The crowd went silent, then erupted into a fresh wave of questions he simply ignored, walking Lucy to the car with his hand firm at her back. A claim, a promise, a vow finally spoken in daylight, for anyone brave enough to challenge it. 6 months later. The penthouse felt different now, warmer, lived in, filled with small evidence of a real marriage instead of a contract. Her books stacked beside his case files, 2 coffee mugs by the sink every morning, a cardigan of hers thrown over the back of his chair that he never once moved. Lucy sat on the balcony, hand resting over the small swell of her stomach, watching the Han River catch the sunset in shades of gold and rose. Taesung came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her, hand covering hers over their unborn child, his chin resting against her temple. "Any regrets?" he murmured against her hair. "None," she said, leaning into him fully. "All the guardedness of that first hearing room long gone. You saved my life, Kim Taesung. And somewhere along the way, without either of us planning it, I gave you mine. Then it's a fair trade," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Because you gave me a reason to be more than the man everyone feared. You gave me a home I didn't know I was missing." The sun set slowly over Seoul, gold light spilling across the water. 2 people who had built something real out of a contract meant to be temporary, now bound by nothing but love, loyalty, and a family growing steadily between them.